I think I messed up. Wait, I'm sure I did. Welcome to Young Elder TV, where UFOs, religions, Anunnaki, and black youth collide in a cosmic comedy. Meet Marcus, our fearless leader. He's an aspiring scientist and part-time alien enthusiast. Then there's Maya, his sister, a no-nonsense lawyer who secretly believes in ancient astronauts. Oh, and don't forget Grandma Pearl. She swears she had tea with an alien once. And finally, their quirky neighbor, Mr. Thompson, convinced he's a reincarnated god. With 3 million fans already hooked, Young Elder TV blends laughs with galactic mysteries. Ready to join the fun? Hit that subscribe button and dive into the cosmic chaos. Young Elder TV, where the stars align for comedy.
What's going on YouTube? Listen up, Young Elder Gang. This is Dr. Joe Blow at you with another banger. Please make sure you like, subscribe and share this video, fam. I hope this video get at least 100,000 likes. In this video, you will find history, definitions, scripture, information, and best of all, what we Americans have been deprived of from the beginning, the truth. Keep in mind, this content used in this video is intended for educational and informational purposes only. We will give you the total truth as we best understand it today. Be sure to hit that like button, Young Elder Gang. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Hit that bell and don't forget to check back with us every day for new content. All right, let's get started. Today we will go in on the Black Hand. The Black Hand was a secret Moroccan society that operated in the early 14th century. The group's goal was to create a new world order from behind the scenes, to rule the world with total domination and control. The Black Hand was also the name of an American criminal organization that operated from the late 1600s to until present day. The Black Hand is a method of extortion used by the Black Hand immigrant gangsters who hid in gated communities in the United States. The Black Hand would send threatening letters to local merchants and other well-to-do people, often signed with a human hand or an ink-drawn revolver. If the target did not pay the ransom, their property would be destroyed, or the victim would be taken out or beaten. The Black Hand, or the Hand, is a council of 13 crime lords that govern the underworld's most powerful criminal organizations. It is considered the ultimate authority of the underworld and is feared and respected by all, up to and including Pope and presidents of countries. The organizations represented by members of the Black Hand have many police forces, politicians, and bureaucrats around the world in their pockets, allowing them to conduct business with virtual impunity. The Black Hand is led by the Elder, who dwells in the deserts of Morocco. The Black Hand is described to be larger than any government on Earth, and that the foundation of the Black Hand dates back to the ancient times, long before the establishment of the Roman Empire. The Elder, also known as the one who sits above the hand, was the enigmatic and all-powerful leader of the Black Hand, who reside in the deserts of Morocco. To find them, travel to the Moroccan desert and follow the Canis Minor constellation. The Elder is considered to be the most powerful individual in the international criminal underworld and has a level of authority superior to those who have a seat at the Black Hand's table. The Black Hand people are the real 13 families. They are not the same as the Rockefellers and Rothschilds. These are what you call front families. They are trustees for the real 13 families who have dark skin, Enlil seed. Right lies in might, freedom an idea only, liberalism, gold, faith, self-government, despotism of capital, the internal foe, the mob, anarchy, politics versus morals, the right of the strong, the invincibility of Jew Masonic authority, end justifies means, the mob a blind man, political ABC party discord, most satisfactory form of rule, despotism, alcohol, classicism, corruption, principles and rules of the Jew Masonic government, terror, liberty, equality, fraternity, principle of dynastic rule, annihilation of the privileges of the Goy aristocracy, that is non-Jew, the new aristocracy, the psychological calculation, abstractness of liberty, power of removal of representatives of the people. Putting aside fine phrases, we shall speak of the significance of each thought. By comparisons and deductions, we shall throw light upon surrounding facts. What I am about to set forth, then, is our system from the 2 points of view, that of ourselves and that of the Goyim, that is, on Jews. It must be noted that men with bad instincts are more in number than the good, and therefore the best results in governing them are attained by violence and terrorization, and not by academic discussions. Every man aims at power. Everyone would like to become a dictator if only he could. and rare indeed are the men who would not be willing to sacrifice the welfare of all for the sake of securing their own welfare. What has restrained the beasts of prey who are called men? What has served for their guidance hitherto? In the beginnings of the structure of society, they were subjected to brutal and blind force. Afterwards, to law, which is the same force, only disguised. I draw the conclusion that by the law of nature, right lies in force. Political freedom is an idea, but not a fact. This idea one must know how to apply whenever it appears necessary, with this bait of an idea to attract the masses of the people to one's party for the purpose of crushing another who is in authority. This task is rendered easier if the opponent has himself been infected with the idea of freedom, so-called liberalism, and for the sake of an idea is willing to yield some of his power. It is precisely here that the triumph of our theory appears. The slackened reins of government are immediately, by the law of life, caught up and gathered together by a new hand, because the blind might of the nation cannot for one single day exist without guidance, and the new authority merely fits into the place of the old, already weakened by liberalism. In our day, the power which has replaced that of the rulers who were liberal is the power of gold. Time was when faith ruled. The idea of freedom is impossible of realization because no one knows how to use it with moderation. It is enough to hand over a people to self-government for a certain length of time for that people to be turned into a disorganized mob. From that moment on, we get internecine strife, which soon develops into battles between classes, in the midst of which states burn down and their importance is reduced to that of a heap of ashes. Whether a state exhausts itself in its own convulsions, whether its internal discord brings it under the power of external foes, in any case, it can be accounted irretrievably lost. It is in our power. The despotism of capital, which is entirely in our hands, reaches out to it a straw that the state, willy-nilly, must take hold of. If not, it goes to the bottom. Should anyone of a liberal mind say that such reflections as the above are immoral, I would put the following questions. If every state has two foes, and if in regard to the external foe it is allowed and not considered immoral to use every manner and art of conflict, as for example to keep the enemy in ignorance of plans of attack and defense, to attack him by night or in superior numbers, then in what way can the same means in regard to a worse foe, the destroyer of the structure of society and the commonweal, be called immoral and not permissible? Is it possible for any sound, logical mind to hope with any success to guide crowds by the aid of reasonable counsels and arguments when any objection or contradiction, senseless though it may be, can be made, and when such objection may find more favor with the people whose powers of reasoning are superficial? Men in masses and the men of the masses, being guided solely by petty passions, paltry beliefs, customs, traditions, and sentimental theorism, fall a prey to party dissension, which hinders any kind of agreement, even on the basis of a perfectly reasonable argument. Every resolution of a crowd depends upon a chance or packed majority, which, in its ignorance of political secrets, puts forth some ridiculous resolution that lays in the administration a seed of anarchy. The political has nothing in common with the moral. The ruler who is governed by the moral is not a skilled politician and is therefore unstable on his throne. He who wishes to rule must have recourse both to cunning and to make-believe. Great national qualities like frankness and honesty are vices in politics, for they bring down rulers from their thrones more effectively and more certainly than the most powerful enemy. Such qualities must be the attributes of the kingdoms of the Goyim, but we must in no wise be guided by them. Our right lies in force. The word right is an abstract thought and proved by nothing. The word means no more than give me what I want in order, and that thereby I may have a proof that I am stronger than you. Where does right begin? Where does it end? In any state in which there is a bad organization of authority, an impersonality of laws and of the rulers who have lost their personality amid the flood of rights ever multiplying out of liberalism, I find a new right, to attack by the right of the strong, and to scatter to the winds all existing forces of order and regulation, to reconstruct all institutions and to become the sovereign lord of those who have left to us the rights of their power by laying them down voluntarily in their liberalism. Our power in the present tottering condition of all forms of power will be more invincible than any other because it will remain invisible until the moment when it has gained such strength that no cunning can any longer undermine it. Out of the temporary evil we are now compelled to commit will emerge the good of an unshakable rule, which will restore the regular course of the machinery of the national life, brought to naught by liberalism. The result justifies the means. Let us, however, in our plans direct our attention not so much to what is good and moral, as to what is necessary and useful. Before us is a plan in which is laid down strategically the line from which we cannot deviate without running the risk of seeing the labor of many centuries brought to naught. In order to elaborate satisfactory forms of action, it is necessary to have regard to the rascality, the slackness, the instability of the mob, its lack of capacity to understand and respect the conditions of its own life or its own welfare. It must be understood that the might of a mob is blind, senseless, and unreasoning force, ever at the mercy of a suggestion from any side. The blind cannot lead the blind without bringing them into the abyss. Consequently, members of the mob, upstarts from the people, even though they should be as a genius for wisdom, yet having no understanding of the political, cannot come forward as leaders of the mob without bringing the whole nation to ruin. Only one trained from childhood for independent rule can have understanding of the words that can be made up of the political alphabet. A people left to itself, that is, to upstarts from its midst, brings itself to ruin by party dissensions excited by the pursuit of power and honours and the disorders arising therefrom. Is it possible for the masses of the people calmly and without petty jealousies to form judgments, to deal with the affairs of the country which cannot be mixed up with personal interests? Can they defend themselves from an external foe? It is unthinkable, for a plan broken up into as many parts as there are heads in the mob loses all homogeneity and thereby becomes unintelligible and impossible of execution. It is only with a despotic ruler that plans can be elaborated extensively and clearly in such a way as to distribute the whole properly among the several parts of the machinery of the state. From this, the conclusion is inevitable that a satisfactory form of government for any country is one that concentrates in the hands of one responsible person. Without an absolute despotism, there can be no existence for civilization, which is carried on not by the masses, but by their guide, whosoever that person may be. The mob is a savage and displays its savagery at every opportunity. The moment the mob seizes freedom in its hands, it quickly turns to anarchy, which in itself is the highest degree of savagery. Behold the alcoholized animals, bemused with drink, the right to an immoderate use of which comes along with freedom. It is not for us and ours to walk that road. The peoples of the Goyim are bemused with alcoholic liquors. Their youth has grown stupid on classicism and from early immorality, into which it has been inducted by our special agents, by tutors, lackeys, governesses in the houses of the wealthy, by clerks and others, by our women in the places of dissipation frequented by the Goyim. In the number of these last, I count also the so-called society ladies, voluntary followers of the others in corruption and luxury. Our countersign is force and make-believe. Only force conquers in political affairs, especially if it be concealed in the talents essential to statesmen. Violence must be the principle, and cunning the make-believe the rule for governments which do not want to lay down their crowns at the feet of agents of some new power. This evil is the one and only means to attain the end, the good. Therefore, we must not stop at bribery, deceit, and treachery when they should serve towards the attainment of our end. In politics, one must know how to seize the property of others without hesitation, if by it we secure submission and sovereignty. Our state, marching along the path of peaceful conquest, has the right to replace the horrors of war by less noticeable and more satisfactory sentences of death, necessary to maintain the terror which tends to produce blind submission. Just but merciless severity is the greatest factor of strength in the state. Not only for the sake of gain, but also in the name of duty, for the sake of victory, we must keep to the program of violence and make-believe. The doctrine of squaring accounts is precisely as strong as the means of which it makes use. Therefore, it is not so much by the means themselves as by the doctrine of severity that we shall triumph and bring all governments into subjection to our super-government. It is enough for them to know that we are merciless for all disobedience to cease. Far back in ancient times, we were the first to cry among the masses of the people the words liberty, equality, fraternity, words many times repeated since those days by stupid poll parrots who from all sides round flew down upon these baits and with them carried away the well-being of the world, true freedom of the individual, formerly so well guarded against the pressure of the mob. The would-be wise men of the Goyim, the intellectuals, could not make anything out of the uttered words in their abstractness, did not note the contradiction of their meaning and interrelation, did not see that in nature there is no equality, cannot be freedom, that nature herself has established inequality of minds, of characters and capacities, just as immutably as she has established subordination to her laws. Never stop to think that the mob is a blind thing, that upstarts elected from among it to bear rule are, in regard to the political, the same blind men as the mob itself, that the adept, though he be a fool, can yet rule, whereas the non-adept, even if he were a genius, understands nothing in the political. To all these things the Goyim paid no regard. Yet all the time it was based upon these things that dynastic rule rested. The father passed on to the son a knowledge of the course of political affairs in such wise that none should know it but members of the dynasty, and none could betray it to the governed. As time went on, the meaning of the dynastic transference of the true position of affairs in the political was lost, and this aided the success of our cause. In all corners of the earth the words liberty, equality, fraternity brought to our ranks, thanks to our blind agents, whole legions who bore our banners with enthusiasm. And all the time these words were cankerworms at work, boring into the well-being of the Goyim, putting an end everywhere to peace, quiet solidarity, and destroying all the foundations of the Goya states. As you will see later, this helped us to our triumph. It gave us the possibility, among other things, of getting into our hands the MasterCard, the destruction of the privileges, or in other words, of the very existence of the aristocracy of the Goyim, that class which was the only defense peoples and countries had against us. On the ruins of the natural and genealogical aristocracy of the Goyim, we have set up the aristocracy of our educated class, headed by the aristocracy of money. The qualifications for this aristocracy we have established in wealth, which is dependent upon us, and in knowledge, for which our learned elders provide the motive force. Our triumph has been rendered easier by the fact that in our relations with the men whom we wanted to have always worked upon the most sensitive chords of the human mind, upon the cash account, upon the cupidity, upon the insatiability for material needs of man, and each one of these human weaknesses taken alone is sufficient to paralyze initiative, for it hands over the will of men to the disposition of him who has bought their activities. The abstraction of freedom has enabled us to persuade the mob in all countries that their government is nothing but the steward of the people who are the owners of the country, and that the steward may be replaced like a worn-out glove. It is this possibility of replacing the representatives of the people which has placed them at our disposal, and, as it were, given us the power of appointment. Economic wars, the foundation of the Jewish predominance, figurehead government and secret advisors, successes of destructive doctrines, adaptability in politics, part played by the press, cost of gold and value of Jewish sacrifice. It's indispensable for our purpose that wars, so far as possible, should not result in territorial gains. War will thus be brought on to the economic ground where the nations will not fail to perceive in the assistance we give the strength of our predominance, and this state of things will put both sides at the mercy of our international agentur, which possesses millions of eyes ever on the weth and unhampered by any limitations whatsoever. Our international rights will then wipe out national rights in the proper sense of right, and will rule the nations precisely as the civil law of states rule the relations of their subjects among themselves. The administrators whom we shall choose from among the public, with strict regard to their capacities for servile obedience, will not be persons trained in the arts of government, and will therefore easily become pawns in our game in the hands of men of learning and genius who will be their advisers, specialists bred and reared from early childhood to rule the affairs of the whole world. As is well known to you, these specialists of ours have been drawing to fit them for rule the information they need from our political plans, from the lessons of history, from observations made in the events of every moment as it passes. The Goyim are not guided by practical use of unprejudiced historical observation, but by theoretical routine without any critical regard for consequent results. We need not, therefore, take any account of them. Let them amuse themselves until the hour strikes, or live on hopes of new forms of enterprising pastime, or on the memories of all they have enjoyed. For them, let that play the principal part, which we have persuaded them to accept as the dictates of science, theory. It is with this object in view that we are constantly, by means of our press, arousing a blind confidence in these theories. The intellectuals of the Goyim will puff themselves up with their knowledge, and without any logical verification of them will put into effect all the information available from science, which our agentur specialists have cunningly pieced together for the purpose of educating their minds in the direction we want. Do not suppose for a moment that these statements are empty words. Think carefully of the successes we arrange for Darwinism, Marxism, Nietzscheism. To us Jews, at any rate, it should be plain to see what a disintegrating importance these directives have had upon the minds of the Goyim. It is indispensable for us to take account of the thoughts, characters, tendencies of the nations, in order to avoid making slips in the political and in the direction of administrative affairs. The triumph of our system, of which the component parts of the machinery may be variously disposed according to the temperament of the peoples met on our way, will fail of success if the practical application of it be not based upon a summing up of the lessons of the past in the light of the present. In the hands of the states of today, there is a great force that creates the movement of thought in the people, and that is the press. The part played by the press is to keep pointing out requirements supposed to be indispensable, to give voice to the complaints of the people, to express and to create discontent. It is in the press that the triumph of freedom of speech finds its incarnation. But the Goyim states have not known how to make use of this force, and it has fallen into our hands. Through the press, we have gained the power to influence while remaining ourselves in the shade. Thanks to the press, we have got the gold in our hands, notwithstanding that we have had to gather it out of oceans of blood and tears. But it has paid us, though we have sacrificed many of our people. Each victim on our side is worth, in the sight of God, 1,000 Goyim. The symbolic snake and its significance, the instability of the constitutional scales, terror in the palaces, power and ambition, parliaments, talkeries, pamphlets, abuse of power, economic slavery, people's rights, monopolist system and the aristocracy, the army of Mason Jewry, decrescence of the Goyim, hunger and rights of capital, the mob and the coronation of the sovereign lord of all the world. The fundamental precept in the program of the future Masonic national schools, the secret of the science of the structure of society, universal economic crisis, security of ours, that is our people, Jews, the despotism of Masonry, the kingdom of reason, loss of the guide, Masonry and the great French Revolution, the king despot of the blood of Zion, causes of the invincibility of Masonry, part played by secret Masonic agents, freedom. Today I may tell you that our goal is now only a few steps off. There remains a small space to cross, and the whole long path we have trodden is ready now to close its cycle of the symbolic snake, by which we symbolize our people. When this ring closes, all the states of Europe will be locked in its coil, as in a powerful vice. The constitution scales of these days will shortly break down, for we have established them with a certain lack of accurate balance in order that they may oscillate incessantly, until they wear through the pivot on which they turn. The Goyim are under the impression that they have welded them sufficiently strong, and they have all along kept on expecting that the scales would come into equilibrium. But the pivots, the kings on their thrones, are hemmed in by their representatives who play the fool, distraught with their own uncontrolled and irresponsible power. This power they owe to the terror which has been breathed into the palaces. As they have no means of getting at their people into their very midst, the kings on their thrones are no longer able to come to terms with them, and so strengthen themselves against seekers after power. We've made a gulf between the far-seeing sovereign power and the blind force of the people, so that both have lost all meaning, for like the blind man and his stick, both are powerless apart. In order to incite seekers after power to a misuse of power, we have set all forces in opposition one to another, breaking up then liberal tendencies towards independence. To this end, we have stirred up every form of enterprise. We have armed all parties. We have set up authority as a target for every ambition. Of states, we have made gladiatorial arenas where a host of confused issues contend. A little more, and disorders and bankruptcy will be universal. babblers inexhaustible have turned into oratorical contests, the sittings of parliament and administrative boards. Bold journalists and unscrupulous pamphleteers daily fall upon executive officials. Abuses of power will put the final touch in preparing all institutions for their overthrow, and everything will fly skyward under the blows of the maddened mob. All people are chained down to heavy toil by poverty more firmly than ever they were chained by slavery and serfdom. From these, one way and another, they might free themselves, these could be settled with, but from want they will never get away. We have included in the Constitution such rights as to the masses appear fictitious and not actual rights. All these so-called people's rights can exist only in idea, an idea which can never be realized in practical life. What is it to the proletariat labourer, bowed double over his heavy toil, crushed by his lot in life if talkers get the right to babble, if journalists get the right to scribble any nonsense side by side with good stuff? Once the proletariat has no other profit out of the Constitution save only those pitiful crumbs which we fling them from our table in return for their voting in favour of what we dictate, in favour of the men we place in power, the servants of our agentur. Republican rights for a poor man are no more than a bitter piece of irony, for the necessity he is under of toiling almost all day gives him no present use of them, but on the other hand robs him of all guarantee of regular and certain earnings by making him dependent on strikes by his comrades or lockouts by his masters. The people under our guidance have annihilated the aristocracy, who were their one and only defence and foster mother for the sake of their own advantage, which is inseparably bound up with the well-being of the people. Nowadays, with the destruction of the aristocracy, the people have fallen into the grips of merciless money-grinding scoundrels who have laid a pitiless and cruel yoke upon the necks of the workers. We appear on the scene as alleged saviours of the worker from this oppression when we propose to him to enter the ranks of our fighting forces, socialists, anarchists, communists, to whom we always give support in accordance with an alleged brotherly rule of the solidarity of all humanity, of our social masonry. The aristocracy, which enjoyed by law the labour of the workers, was interested in seeing that the workers were well-fed, healthy and strong. We are interested in just the opposite, in the diminution, the killing out of the goyim. Our power is in the chronic shortness of food and physical weakness of the worker, because by all that this implies he is made the slave of our will, and he will not find in his own authorities either strength or energy to set against our will. Hunger creates the right of capital to rule the worker more surely than it was given to the aristocracy by the legal authority of kings. By want and the envy and hatred which it engenders, we shall move the mobs, and with their hands we shall wipe out all those who hinder us on our way. When the hour strikes for our sovereign Lord of all the world to be crowned, it is these same hands which will sweep away everything that might be a hindrance thereto. The Goyim have lost the habit of thinking unless prompted by the suggestions of our specialists. Therefore they do not see the urgent necessity of what we, when our kingdom comes, shall adopt at once, namely this, that it is essential to teach in national schools one simple, true piece of knowledge, the basis of all knowledge, the knowledge of the structure of human life, of social existence, which requires division of labor and consequently the division of men into classes and conditions. It is essential for all to know that owing to difference in the objects of human activity, there cannot be any equality, that he who by any act of his compromises a whole class cannot be equally responsible before the law with him who affects no one but only his own honor. The true knowledge of the structure of society, into the secrets of which we do not admit the Goyim, would demonstrate to all men that the positions and work must be kept within a certain circle, that they may not become a source of human suffering arising from an education which does not correspond with the work which individuals are called upon to do. After a thorough study of this knowledge, the peoples will voluntarily submit to authority and accept such position as is appointed them in the state. In the present state of knowledge and the direction we have given to its development, the people, blindly believing things in print, cherishes, thanks to promptings intended to mislead and to its own ignorance, a blind hatred towards all conditions which it considers above itself, for it has no understanding of the meaning of class and condition. This hatred will be still further magnified by the effects of an economic crisis which will stop dealings on the exchanges and bring industry to a standstill. We shall create by all the secret subterranean methods open to us, and with the aid of gold, which is all in our hands, a universal economic crisis, whereby we shall throw upon the streets whole mobs of workers simultaneously in all the countries of Europe. These mobs will rush delightedly to shed the blood of those whom in the simplicity of their ignorance they have envied from their cradles, and whose property they will then be able to loot. Ours they will not touch, because the moment of attack will be known to us, and we shall take measures to protect our own. We have demonstrated that progress will bring all the Goyim to the sovereignty of reason. Our despotism will be precisely that, for it will know how by wise severities to pacificate all unrest, to cauterize liberalism out of all institutions. When the populace has seen that all sorts of concessions and indulgences are yielded it in the name of freedom, it has imagined itself to be sovereign lord and has stormed its way to power. But naturally, like every other blind man, it has come upon a host of stumbling blocks. It has rushed to find a guide. It has never had the sense to return to the former state, and it has laid down its plenipotentiary powers at our feet. Remember the French Revolution, to which it was we who gave the name of great. The secrets of its preparations are well known to us, for it was wholly the work of our hands. Ever since that time we have been leading the peoples from one disenchantment to another, so that in the end they should turn also from us in favor of that king despot of the blood of Zion, whom we are preparing for the world. At the present day, we are, as an international force, invincible, because if attacked by some, we are supported by other states. It is the bottomless rascality of the Goyim peoples, who crawl on their bellies to force, but are merciless towards weakness, unsparing to faults and indulgent to crimes, unwilling to bear the contradictions of a free social system, but patient unto martyrdom under the violence of a bold despotism. It is those qualities which are aiding us to independence. From the premier dictators of the present day, the Goyim peoples suffer patiently and bear such abuses as for the least of them they would have beheaded 20 kings. What is the explanation of this phenomenon, this curious inconsequence of the masses of the peoples in their attitude towards what would appear to be events of the same order? It is explained by the fact that these dictators whisper to the peoples through their agents, that through these abuses they are inflicting injury on the states with the highest purpose, to secure the welfare of the peoples, the international brotherhood of them all, their solidarity and equality of rights. Naturally, they do not tell the peoples that this unification must be accomplished only under our sovereign rule, and thus the people condemn the upright and acquit the guilty, persuaded ever more and more that it can do whatsoever it wishes. Thanks to this state of things, the people are destroying every kind of stability and creating disorders at every step. The word freedom brings out the communities of men to fight against every kind of force, against every kind of authority, even against God and the laws of nature. For this reason we, when we come into our kingdom, shall have to erase this word from the lexicon of life as implying a principle of brute force, which turns mobs into bloodthirsty beasts. These beasts, it is true, fall asleep again every time when they have drunk their fill of blood, and at such times can easily be riveted into their chains. But if they be not given blood, they will not sleep and continue to struggle. Stages of a republic: Gentile masonry, freedom and faith, international industrial competition, role of speculation, cult of gold. Every republic passes through several stages. The first of these is comprised in the early days of mad raging by the blind mob, tossed hither and thither, right and left. The second is demagogy, from which is born anarchy, and that leads inevitably to despotism, not any longer legal and overt and therefore responsible despotism, but to unseen and secretly hidden, yet nevertheless sensibly felt despotism in the hands of some secret organization or other, whose acts are the more unscrupulous inasmuch as it works behind a screen, behind the backs of all sorts of agents, the changing of whom not only does not injuriously affect, but actually aids the secret force by saving it, thanks to continual changes from the necessity of expending its resources on the rewarding of long services. Who and what is in a position to overthrow an invisible force, and this is precisely what our force is. Gentile masonry blindly serves as a screen for us and our objects, but the plan of action of our force, even its very abiding place, remains for the whole people an unknown mystery. But even freedom might be harmless and have its place in the state economy without injury to the well-being of the peoples, if it rested upon the foundation of faith in God, upon the brotherhood of humanity, unconnected with the conception of equality, which is negatived by the very laws of creation, for they have established subordination. With such a faith as this, a people might be governed by a wardship of parishes, and would walk contentedly and humbly under the guiding hand of its spiritual pastor, submitting to the dispositions of God upon earth. This is the reason why it is indispensable for us to undermine all faith, to tear out of the minds of the Goyim the very principle of Godhead and the Spirit, and to put in its place arithmetical calculations and material needs. In order to give the Goyim no time to think and take note, their minds must be diverted towards industry and trade. Thus all the nations will be swallowed up in the pursuit of gain, and in the race for it will not take note of their common foe. But again, in order that freedom may once for all disintegrate and ruin the communities of the Goyim, we must put industry on a speculative basis. The result of this will be that what is withdrawn from the land by industry will slip through the hands and pass into speculation, that is, to our classes. The intensified struggle for superiority and shocks delivered to economic life will create, nay, have already created, disenchanted, cold, and heartless communities. Such communities will foster a strong aversion towards the higher political and towards religion. Their only guide is gain, that is gold, which they will erect into a veritable cult for the sake of those material delights which it can give. Then will the hour strike when, not for the sake of attaining the good, not even to win wealth, but solely out of hatred towards the privileged, the lower classes of the Goyim will follow our lead against our rivals for power, the intellectuals of the Goyim. Creation of an intensified centralization of government, methods of seizing power by masonry, causes of the impossibility of agreement between states, the state of predestination of the Jews, gold, the engine of the machinery of states, significance of criticism, show institutions, weariness from word spinning, how to take a grip of public opinion, significance of personal initiative, the super government. What form of administrative rule can be given to communities in which corruption has penetrated everywhere? Communities where riches are attained only by the clever surprise tactics of semi-swindling tricks, where looseness reigns, where morality is maintained by penal measures and harsh laws but not by voluntarily accepted principles, where the feelings towards faith and country are obliterated by cosmopolitan convictions. What form of rule is to be given to these communities if not that despotism which I shall describe to you later? We shall create an intensified centralization of government in order to grip in our hands all the forces of the community. We shall regulate mechanically all the actions of the political life of our subjects by new laws. These laws will withdraw one by one all the indulgences and liberties which have been permitted by the Goyim, and our kingdom will be distinguished by a despotism of such magnificent proportions as to be at any moment and in every place in a position to wipe out any Goyim who oppose us by deed or word. We shall be told that such a despotism as I speak of is not consistent with the progress of these days, but I will prove to you that it is. In the times when the peoples looked upon kings on their thrones as on a pure manifestation of the will of God, they submitted without a murmur to the despotic power of kings. But from the day when we insinuated into their minds the conception of their own rights, they began to regard the occupants of thrones as mere ordinary mortals. The holy unction of the Lord's anointed has fallen from the heads of kings in the eye of the people, and when we also robbed them of their faith in God, the might of power was flung upon the streets into the place of public proprietorship and was seized by us. Moreover, the art of directing masses and individuals by means of cleverly manipulated theory and verbiage, by regulations of life in common and all sorts of other quirks, in all which the Goyim understand nothing, belongs likewise to the specialists of our administrative brain. Reared on analysis, observation, on delicacies of fine calculation, in this species of skill we have no rivals, any more than we have either in the drawing up of plans of political actions and solidarity. In this respect, the Jesuits alone might have compared with us, but we have contrived to discredit them in the eyes of the unthinking mob as an overt organization, while we ourselves all the while have kept our secret organization in the shade. However, it is probably all the same to the world who is its sovereign lord, whether the head of Catholicism or our despot of the blood of Zion. But to us, the chosen people, it is very far from being a matter of indifference. For a time, perhaps, we might be successfully dealt with by a coalition of the Goyim of all the world, But from this danger we are secured by the discord existing among them, whose roots are so deeply seated that they can never now be plucked up. We have set one against another the personal and national reckonings of the Goyim, religious and race hatreds, which we have fostered into a huge growth in the course of the past 20 centuries. This is the reason why there is not one state which would anywhere receive support if it were to raise its arm, for every one of them must bear in mind that any agreement against us would be unprofitable to itself. We are too strong. There is no evading our power. The nations cannot come to even an inconsiderable private agreement without our secretly having a hand in it. Per me reges regnant. It is through me that kings reign. And it was said by the prophets that we were chosen by God himself to rule over the whole earth. God has endowed us with genius that we may be equal to our task. Were genius in the opposite camp, it would still struggle against us, but even so a newcomer is no match for the old established settler. The struggle would be merciless between us, such a fight as the world has never yet seen. Aye, and the genius on their side would have arrived too late. All the wheels of the machinery of all states go by the force of the engine which is in our hands, and that engine of the machinery of states is gold. The science of political economy invented by our learned elders has for a long past been giving royal prestige to capital, if it is to cooperate untrammeled, must be free to establish a monopoly of industry and trade. This is already being put in execution by an unseen hand in all quarters of the world. This freedom will give political force to those engaged in industry, and that will help to oppress the people. Nowadays, it is more important to disarm the peoples than to lead them into war. More important to use for our advantage the passions which have burst into flames than to quench their fire. More important to catch up and interpret the ideas of others to suit ourselves than to eradicate them. The principal object of our directorate consists in this: to debilitate the public mind by criticism, to lead it away from serious reflections calculated to arouse resistance, to distract the forces of the mind towards a sham fight of empty eloquence. In all ages, the peoples of the world, equally with individuals, have accepted words for deeds, for they are content with a show and rarely pause to note in the public arena whether promises are followed by performance. Therefore, we shall establish show institutions which will give eloquent proof of their benefit to progress. We shall assume to ourselves the liberal physiognomy of all parties, of all directions, and we shall give that physiognomy a voice in orators who will speak so much that they will exhaust the patience of their hearers and produce an abhorrence of oratory. In order to put public opinion into our hands, we must bring it into a state of bewilderment by giving expression from all sides to so many contradictory opinions, and for such length of time as will suffice to make the Goyim lose their heads in the labyrinth and come to see that the best thing is to have no opinion of any kind in matters political which it is not given to the public to understand, because they are understood only by him who guides the public. This is the first secret. The second secret requisite for the success of our government is comprised in the following: to multiply to such an extent national failings, habits, passions, conditions of civil life, that it will be impossible for anyone to know where he is in the resulting chaos, so that the people in consequence will fail to understand one another. This measure will also serve us in another way, namely to sow discord in all parties, to dislocate all collective forces which are still unwilling to submit to us, and to discourage any kind of personal initiative which might in any degree hinder our affair. There's nothing more dangerous than personal initiative. If it has genius behind it, such initiative can do more than can be done by millions of people among whom we have sown discord. We must so direct the education of the Goyim communities that whenever they come upon a matter requiring initiative, they may drop their hands in despairing impotence. The strain which results from freedom of action saps the forces when it meets with the freedom of another. From this collision arise grave moral shocks, disenchantments, failures. By all these means we shall so wear down the Goyim that they will be compelled to offer us international power of a nature that by its position will enable us without any violence gradually to absorb all the state forces of the world and to form a super-government. In place of the rulers of today, we shall set up a bogey which will be called the super-government administration. Its hands will reach out in all directions like nippers, and its organization will be of such colossal dimensions that it cannot fail to subdue all the nations of the world.